Hello, I'm Mark Schultz, Commissioner of the Rehabilitation Services Administration, and delegated the authority to perform the functions and duties of the Assistant Secretary for the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services. I'm here today with Laurie VanderPloeg, Director of the Office of Special Education Programs. Yesterday marked 45 years since the Education for All Handicapped Children Act was signed into law. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, as it's now known, is both an education and a civil rights law, and it has had a demonstrable impact improving the education and life outcomes for children with disabilities and their families. This week, the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services will honor and celebrate this history. Each day, we will release a guest blog and some brief testimonials from stakeholders on the impact of this landmark legislation. We're so happy to share some remarks with all of you today in celebration of the 45th anniversary of IDEA. I encourage you to visit the OSERS website at https://sites.ed.gov/IDEA/ for additional information on IDEA. Today, Laurie and I are going to have a conversation about some of the recent outcomes and successes IDEA has influenced. Laurie, you've had a unique perspective as both a parent of a child with a disability and an educator. In your experience, how did IDEA impact your son's experience in school?
Thanks, Mark, for the opportunity to share remarks with you today on this law that has been an influential part of both my personal and professional life. IDEA provided my son an opportunity to have his individual, unique needs appropriately addressed within a specialized program and then within the general education setting. He received specially designed instruction for both academics as well as related services. In high school, he attended a career technical education program for 2 years to develop job skills in preparation for his post-secondary transition. He was assigned a vocational rehabilitative service coordinator that secured a placement in a post-high school career training program, which led to employment. Today, with additional adult service support, he is living independently.
Thanks, Laurie, for sharing some of the success your family experienced. Even though your family was on the early side of IDEA services, your son's post-school outcomes of independent living, employment, and community involvement are the outcomes I've focused on for most of my professional career. For me, the long goal will always be that IDEA helps us all prepare children with disabilities for life. I think the Turnbulls, longtime special educators and parents of some with disabilities, clarified that the true outcome of special education and related services was to prepare children and youth to fully participate in an enviable life characterized by opportunities and successes, not only in education, but also in post-education, independent living, employment, and community involvement. I know of one southern state that has worked hard to align the requirements for transition from IDEA and the Workforce Investment Opportunity Act, as well as Perkins 5, by targeting youth and students with disabilities in focused, cross-disciplinary training efforts across the state. From my perspective, I see meaningful collaborative planning and service delivery between LEAs and local service providers for pre-employment transition services gradually becoming the norm. I hope future reauthorizations of IDEA will continue to strengthen and enhance the provisions for pre-employment transition services. And in our future celebrations of IDEA, we'll continue to see greater connections between education and employment. I hope we're able to expand our abilities to more fully prepare children and youth with disabilities for greater access to a more comprehensive array of life opportunities.
Mark, that was such a great point. And to achieve that long-term goal, we have to continue to increase our efforts to enhance transition services and better prepare youth with disabilities for competitive integrated employment by increasing their opportunities to practice, job shadow, and intern while still in supportive school environments so they can learn and practice the skills needed for later success.
Thanks, Laurie. I'd like to turn to Part D for a few minutes and acknowledge the important role IDEA Part D investments have had over the years in pushing the envelope of what is possible for children with disabilities and their parents. IDEA Part D supports states, districts, schools, and families in their efforts to provide effective supports and services to children with disabilities. Part D programs support technical assistance efforts, technology and media investments, parent centers, state personnel development grants, and personnel preparation grants. Effective personnel for children with disabilities has been a focus of your career, Laurie, in your time at OSEP.
Right, Mark. As a lifelong educator, I know the critical importance of making sure that every child has the benefit of an effective teacher or provider. A few weeks ago, we held a national summit on attracting, preparing, and retaining effective personnel for children with disabilities. I was very impressed with the innovative strategies and the commitment to enhancing our efforts in this area. Did you know that federal teacher grants preceded the 1975 law? Beginning with personal preparation, support for children with intellectual disabilities and deafness. Since the late 1950s, federal supports to prepare teachers has focused on specially designed instruction, interventions, strategies, and supports that are critical to ensure that children with disabilities meet their educational goals. Unfortunately, special education teacher shortage have forced states to refocus efforts to attract, prepare, and retain effective teachers. One Midwestern state is increasing the recruitment and retention of special educators by implementing a collection of initiatives ranging from tuition support and loan repayment to statewide communities of practice, mentoring systems, and other supports for prospective special educators to find affordable routes to licensure. Another mid-Atlantic state leveraged social media such as Twitter or LinkedIn to bring awareness to grow your own programs aimed at recruiting high schoolers in rural areas, as well as career changers to pursue careers in teaching special education. IDEA has emphasized the use of evidence-based practices, which are critical, but we also need to make sure that we have enough personnel who know how to implement those practices to lead to the outcomes our children with disabilities need. Ensuring every child has an effective teacher is the most critical leverage point to continue improving achievement, outcomes, and opportunities for children with disabilities.
Great points, Laurie. I'm glad you talked about the outcomes children with disabilities deserve. Earlier, I mentioned the important role Part D investments have historically had in pushing the envelope of what's possible for children and youth with disabilities. When we look back on the history of this legislation, the impact of this law from access to the schoolhouse, to access to the curriculum, assessments, and accountability provisions, to access to opportunities, we can witness the historic shattering of the expectations time and time again. Last May, two graduation stories caught my eye. One, a young lady with a bachelor's degree in radio, TV, and film, and the other, a young lady with a law degree. 45 years ago, their successes would not have been possible, not because these two young women did not have the knowledge, skills, and talents, but because we, as a society, limited their potential with our low expectations of what a child with Down syndrome or a child who is deafblind is capable of achieving. IDEA is always intended to push the boundaries of possibility. It's up to us to continue to build and enhance the environments, supports, and strategies to make successes like these two women experienced, more typical achievements for children with disabilities. I hope our history of progress speaks well for our future ability to continue to create and support high expectations, as well as to provide early and effective ongoing support to children and families to enable them to realize the dreams every family has for their children.
Mark, speaking of families, IDEA has, since its inception, focused on the importance of engaging parents and families in the special education process as decision-making partners. One of the primary purposes of IDEA was not only to provide and protect the rights of parents and their children, but also to support parent engagement and partnerships with programs and school personnel to determine the best ways to meet each child's needs. IDEA has continued to push and support the participation of parents in all phases, from being at the table, contributing to state education plans, to being around the table to determine their child's IEP goals. One of our Mid-Atlantic states has focused on elevating the parent voice throughout their system. They have involved families in their state technical assistance system, including collaboratively developing with their federally funded parent center programs to empower families of children with intellectual disabilities. Prior to the beginning of the school year, the state co-sponsored with many family serving agencies a webinar to inform parents of students with disabilities of what to expect in the new school year. Parents are largely responsible for the initial premise of IDEA that are still in place today and have been critical, tenacious advocates in ensuring IDEA's continued progress.
Parents have been critical players throughout the history of IDEA. In the 1980s, they were instrumental in increasing the age range for services under IDEA. In 1980, the law was extended to include children from age 3, and in 1986, the provision was extended to birth. Today, over 400,000 infants are served under IDEA. Several states across the country have worked to expand inclusive opportunities for preschool children with disabilities. One SEA in the Mid-Atlantic developed an early childhood inclusion guide in collaboration with the member agencies of their Early Childhood Inclusion Committee for early childhood providers and programs to address policies, strategies for family engagement, accommodations, modifications and supports, child find strategies, and resources to meet the developmental needs of preschool children with disabilities. In addition, states have worked to individualize their child find strategies to reach vulnerable infants and toddlers and their families. One lead agency in a Mid-Atlantic state partnered with their other state agencies to better track infants experiencing neonatal withdrawal so that they could better understand neonatal abstinence syndrome on infant development, the needs of families experiencing addiction, how community partners could collaborate to support families, and how to implement specialized service coordination under Part C to meet the needs of the family and infant with prenatal exposure.
Mark, I think another area of progress has been in the enhanced alignment between IDEA and ESEA at the state level. Students with disabilities are general education students first. 64% of them spend over 80% of their day in the general education classroom. From my experience at the local level, and then most recently at the national level, I've seen the move to a more collaborative, more aligned reality for general and special education. In addition, many special education practices like progress monitoring, screening, multi-tiered system of supports, the data-based decision-making are being incorporated into general education, helping both those with disabilities and their non-disabled peers. An example, one Midwestern state has aligned its infrastructure to better support IDEA and ESEA programs and leveraged its technical assistance network to increase the capacity of districts to implement and sustain the use of evidence-based practices in general education classrooms. Another example is a cooperative partnership for over a decade, focusing on school and district-wide PBIS implementation between the OSEP Center on Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports and the Midwestern States Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, where improvements in attendance, achievement, and increased placement in the general education environment has been documented for all children, including youth with disabilities. By aligning special education with the MTSS framework and implementing data-based individualized instruction, A local district in New England state saw marked student level improvement on valid and reliable progress monitoring tools. In 1 year, 78% of students receiving interventions reached ambitious growth goals set using national norms.
Great examples, Laurie, of the positive impact of improved collaboration and alignment between special and general education. That ability to collaborate and work together to improve outcomes for all children, especially those with disabilities, has taken on new meaning during these past few months. The abrupt change we were all confronted with last March demonstrated our strengths, but it also exposed our systemic weaknesses, and special education was not immune. We saw the commitment of many to figure out how to use the flexibilities within IDEA to continue services. We all know it's not been perfect, but I've been amazed with the innovation in our special education teachers and their creative efforts to continue instruction and support for children with disabilities. I also continue to be amazed by the tenacity of both parents and providers to continue services and supports in the face of these challenging times.
Hey, I agree, Mark. I too have been amazed by the efforts over these past months. As I've said many times, our OSEP Technical Assistance Centers sprang into action, retooling resources to support state and district efforts in remote instruction. For example, a northeastern state, prior to last March, was using IDEA Part B funds to provide a continuum of preventative supports to all students, including students with disabilities. During the pandemic, the state was able to transition to provide remote, just-in-time training and coaching to support ongoing and enhanced implementation of their MTSS framework for academics and behavior. An administrator from one of their large districts commented that their framework was the basis for how they supported students' transitions from in-person to remote learning. And it will how we support students when we transition back. I encourage educators and parents to visit our OSEPideasthatwork.org website to access a range of useful resources from our funded investments.
Thanks, Laurie. I also remind folks to go to our OSERS website. That's https://sites.ed.gov/IDEA/ for additional resources on the history of IDEA and our tributes to the 45th anniversary, with new celebration tributes being released each day this week. As I said earlier, yesterday marked the 45th anniversary of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. When this law was initially signed, children who today are graduating college and law school, inventing products, owning their own business, and raising families were excluded from school. Today, over 7 million children with disabilities receive a free, appropriate public education and continue to shatter historic expectations. There's much to celebrate. There's much to be proud of as a special education community. But there's also still much to do. For there are children with disabilities with dreams of completing an Ironman triathlon or sitting on the Supreme Court. And we need to continue to improve the instruction, supports, interventions, services, and opportunities each child needs to make their dream a reality. Thank you all for joining us today, and happy 45th IDEA.